From the KTVB News Group, this is a Decision 2022 special. The race for State Superintendent of Public Instruction. It's a position that oversees a budget of more than $2 billion, sets standards in education, and fights for schools in the legislature. Republican incumbent Sherri Ybarra faces a challenge from former president of the State Board of Education, Debbie Critchfield, and former Idaho State Senator, Branden Durst. The big question tonight, what is their vision for providing the best education possible for Idaho's kids? Our KTVB studio serves as a backdrop as they debate live to try to win your vote ahead of the primary election Tuesday, May 17th. This is the debate for Superintendent of Public Instruction. Here is News Channel 7's Doug Petcash.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to the KTVB debate for Superintendent of Public Instruction on the Republican ballot. I'm Doug Petcash, your moderator for tonight. Idaho's 115 public school districts and 68 public charter schools educate more than 317,000 Idaho kids, according to the latest numbers from the State Department of Education. The Superintendent of Public Instruction is a statewide constitutional officer who runs the State Department of Education, which runs the state's public school system. So that person is the one who oversees and advocates for the education of all those children. The superintendent, as you heard, oversees a department budget north of $2 billion. The superintendent also has a seat as a voting member on the State Board of Education, and they serve 4-year terms. Participating tonight are the following candidates. Sherri Ybarra is currently serving as the Superintendent of Public Instruction. She was first elected to the position in 2014. Debbie Critchfield was appointed to the State Board of Education in 2014 as well. She spent 7 years on the board, serving as president for the last 2. And Branden Durst is a former state representative and senator. He represented Idaho's 18th legislative district as a Democrat in a year when a few debates have been canceled because candidates turned down invitations to face the opponents. We want to thank all of you for agreeing to participate in this important opportunity for Idaho voters to learn more about you so they can make an informed decision about who to support. So again, thank you for taking part tonight. Our panelists tonight are my colleagues at KTVB, Chief Political Reporter Joe Paris, and Anchor and Investigative Reporter Morgan Romero, as well as Logan Finney, an Associate Producer and Show Host for Idaho Public Television. The debate will run approximately 60 minutes, and there will be no commercial interruptions during the event. We begin with a quick review of the rules. The candidates will each give a 1-minute opening statement. They will then field questions from our panelists. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer. 30 seconds of rebuttal time may also be granted to the candidate, and our panelists may also ask follow-up questions when warranted. KTVB producer Kai Tucker is here to help the candidates keep track of their time. We'll start with opening statements. The order was predetermined by a random draw. Superintendent Ybarra will go first, then Senator Durst, and finally Mrs. Critchfield. So, Superintendent Ybarra, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and a heartfelt thank you to KTVB and the panelists tonight for the opportunity to speak right to the voters about why I believe I deserve a 3rd term as Idaho's Superintendent of Public Instruction. I look back over the last 7 years and how our educational system is leading the nation in the fact that we've gone from 31st in achievement to 17th in achievement. We are 5th in the nation for college and career ready, and we are number 1 in the nation for college credits earned while still in high school. Under my leadership, we've secured nearly $100 million of new money each year since I took office. And I am one of the longest standing elected superintendents in the nation, and I love my job. Stay with me, Idaho, while I take us to top 10 in the nation. I'm Sherri Ybarra, and I would be honored to represent you once again as Idaho's 25th Superintendent of Public Instruction.
Thank you, Superintendent Ybarra. And Senator Durst, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Doug. My name is Branden Durst. I'm a Christian, a husband, a father to 5, and I am the conservative for state superintendent. This race is a race of 2 competing visions for the future of Idaho schools. An insider's vision that believes that the system knows best and that we need to spend more money to fix the system. And the competing vision that I represent, which is the vision of an outsider and a conservative who believes we need to get back to trusting parents again to let them lead their children's education. I am that conservative leader because I believe that we have and shall continue to have a great education system when parents have the most control and the most to say as to what happens to their schools. My campaign has been endorsed by nearly every conservative group in the state of Idaho. It's been endorsed by most conservative legislators in the state of Idaho, and it's being endorsed by many voters throughout the state of Idaho who believe in the conservative vision that I bring. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Mrs. Critchfield.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm running for state superintendent because I believe that Idaho deserves a strong educational leader that will set the vision for the needs of the 21st century classroom and student. I'm running because our kids matter, our parents matter, and our teachers matter. And great schools matter to Idaho. The core of my vision rests on skills and work readiness. And that begins with a strong foundation of reading and continues throughout as we prepare our students for their lives and their careers, and must take in an element of financial literacy. We can set high expectations for our students that focus on mental health, engagement, learning loss, and achievement. We can do better. I have the background, the experience, the leadership qualities to move Idaho where we want to be. And I'm asking for your support tonight and look forward to the opportunity to visit and share.
Mrs. Critchfield, thank you. Time to turn it over to the panelists for questions now, and we begin with KTVB's Joe Paris.
Thank you very much, Doug. And this first question is for the entire panel, so think about that as we ask that. We'll again go in the same order that we started in, with Superintendent Ybarra answering this question first. So our first question is, what is your view of public education in the state of Idaho, and what do you think the government's role is in that? And I want to quote the Idaho Constitution as you consider that. It shall be the duty of the Idaho legislature to establish and maintain a general, uniform, and thorough system of public free common schools. Superintendent Ybarra.
Well, I am the only teacher standing on this stage tonight asking for the voters' support, and knowing that we have a great educational system in the state of Idaho. The stats that I quoted earlier are not my statistics. They are a third-party statistics. Again, we are 5th in the nation for college and career ready. We have gone from 31st in the nation to 17th for achievement. Our kids are #1 in the nation for taking college credits while still in high school. And I believe the things that we need to work on moving forward, and I know as the only classroom teacher on this stage who's run a building as a principal, who's been a classroom teacher teaching kids to read, are the things that are going to matter moving forward to Idahoans. We need to close the achievement gaps. We need to work on our funding formula. We need to talk about the aging schools that are across our state, and we need more parental involvement. We're going to continue to work on reading achievement in our state, where I'm going to work on parental involvement. I'm going to work on raising the profession and teacher salaries exactly as I have coming into this position as your state superintendent, and I am proud of the educational system we have in Idaho. I don't think anybody believes that it's broken, although we do have some areas that we need to work on that I mentioned tonight.
Mr. Durst, what is your view of public education in the state of Idaho, and what do you think the government's role is in that, the state government, to be clear?
Well, I think what we've seen, and what I think you forgot to mention in part of Article 9, Section 1, is the first part, which tells us why we have a public education system in the first place. The reason we have a public education system, according to the Idaho Constitution, is to protect a Republican form of government. And that's why I believe that we have to have someone who understands and believes in the Idaho Constitution leading our schools. So many things are happening in our schools today, whether it be the sexualization of our schools, critical race theory, and other social justice indoctrination, that are keeping us from meeting that constitutional mandate. And so I am proposing a series of ways to make sure that we can eradicate those things, to protect our schools so we can make sure that we meet that constitutional imperative. And as to the latter component, I also have a plan that will allow us to provide more equal funding across the state, and so that we don't see the huge disparities between teachers or between the amount of money that we give per student as we currently have today.
Ms. Critchfield?
Thank you. I believe that COVID created an opportunity for us. It did not create the issues that our parents, our communities, and our teachers feel, but it really highlighted and intensified some of the feelings, and we've got this opportunity to create and transform the system that we've got. I'm not here to tell you that our teachers are doing a poor job or that our communities are all over the place frustrated, but I am here to question third-party information that I can't verify, and I'm here to bring out that we need a leader and a vision. This is where the government's part is. You need to be responsible to the taxpayer, and we want, what's the return on that investment? And I'm looking for someone that can be an advocate. That's a different set of qualities beyond a school teacher, and we're looking for someone that can create and transform the system that we need, bring forward the things that are working well, and change those that we need some work on.
Thank you. Over the last few days, we've been asking our KTVB viewers for input and their questions that they would like to ask of you. And so this first question is an overview which we received in many different forms through our text message system. And so for this first topic, or second topic, I should say, the question was, tell us what experience you have had as a teacher in the classroom. And for this question, we start with Morgan.
Superintendent Ybarra, if you want to answer that one.
Absolutely. I was an 11-year veteran in the classroom. I was also a vice principal and a principal, a federal programs director, a curriculum director, all before becoming one of your longest standing elected superintendents in the nation. I'm the only one on this stage that has run a classroom, that has run a building, and now has run your state and has been responsible for an over $2 billion budget for public education. I have the strong team in place to take us to top 10 in the nation, and I think you will find out tonight that my opponents have absolutely zero experience when it comes to the classroom or leading our educators to top 10. They've not walked in their shoes. They've not taught a classroom of students to read. They have not had to have a fire drill and have students exit the building. They have not had to make sure that kids have their lunch money. Again, they've not walked in their shoes. I've been a teacher. I've led this state to 17th in the nation. I've done everything that the voters of Idaho have asked me to do, and I'm proud to represent Idahoans as the 25th Superintendent of Public Instruction.
And this next question is going to be directed to Mrs. Critchfield. Why are you doing this, and do you believe that you have the educational background to run the state's education system?
I love this question, and the reason I'm standing here is because I believe that we can move forward in a way that we need to with our kids, with our teachers. I was a State Board of Education member for 7 years. Prior to that, I was a local board member. I have been involved in education in my adult life as an advocate for kids for the last 20 years. And I can tell you, as I sat at the table, the state education table, I questioned myself 2 years ago. What's our vision? Where are we going? I have not seen the results, and I believe that Mrs. Ybarra has missed the assignment that she was elected to do. And I want to provide the leadership, the advocacy that our kids need, our parents need, and that our teachers need. It is time for a change. I am the change candidate, and this is a great opportunity to show that contrast between myself and the others.
And you worked for several years on the State Board of Education. Looking back on your time there, what's one decision you made that you wish you could change, or is there anything you regret that you wish you could change?
Wow. You know, there was a lot of things that were challenging at the beginning of the pandemic. And I look back, and hindsight is always 20/20. And knowing what we do now, I think during that soft closure period, we probably closed too soon. That was something that our school districts were asking us. I had superintendents and others calling. They were unsure. They were trying to be responsible and responsive to their communities. Everyone was in a panic about what was going to happen. And now that we look back, I look and I think, well, could we have stayed open a little bit longer, finished that school year, and then worked on how we get kids back into school? What I am proud of is the fact that our people came together and we were able to get our kids back in person.
Okay, thank you.
And we're going to go back to Joe now for a question for Senator Durst.
Mr. Durst, as you stand up here tonight, do you believe that you are the most qualified candidate out of the trio in this debate? As we've highlighted, your colleagues to your left and right do have more experience working in higher education leading, whereas you are new to this arena.
Well, this is a mischaracterization of my background. And in fact, I'd like to correct the record. Ms. Ybarra knows that I have teaching experience. She pretends like I don't. I've taught over a dozen sections of political science courses at the College of Western Idaho. I was a curriculum developer there. And so I've got plenty of classroom experience. My master's degree is in public policy, and I have an emphasis in higher education administration and in higher education policy. I've actually ran successful legislation to improve Idaho schools, including the Advanced Opportunities Program. I've got a lot of experience in this area, but what I don't have is insider experience, and I think that's a plus. I don't know how someone can claim to be the change candidate when they're the one who actually sat as the president of the state board for 2 years in the exact position you need to be to make the major changes that she's talking about. She actually failed the people of Idaho by not leading when she had the chance, and now she wants to step into a role where she gets paid to do the exact same thing. I think we need a leader, someone who's going to stand up, who has a history of action, who's gotten things done, and that's what I've proven to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And now Logan Finney with Idaho Public Television.
Superintendent Ybarra, this question is for you. As the incumbent, you're in a unique position asking voters to re-elect you. You cited some figures earlier with improving education metrics in Idaho, but also under your tenure, there have been incidents such as a 2020 lawsuit with the legislature over a number of IT and data positions that were moved from your Department of Education to the greater board's oversight. And in that lawsuit, there were a number of claims, including that lawmakers were doing this as political payback for not supporting their legislative goals. Do you have the relationships with education stakeholders to implement your policy vision going forward in a third term?
Absolutely. I have had numerous pieces of legislation pass. Examples include mastery-based education, in-person learning. The civic standards moved forward this year. That resolution, I have a proven track record of success. You cannot argue with the numbers. The success is undeniable. Also, I had the great opportunity to stand on the Capitol steps just a couple weeks ago while we announced to the people of Idaho that we have removed the Common Core, and so legislators were behind me, including the chair of the Senate and the House Education Committees. So I am the only candidate up here tonight on the stage that has a proven track record of success and can show you that all of my priorities got through this year in the legislature. We have historic investments this year in education. So I think that proves that I can get the job done and I can work with the legislature.
Superintendent Ybarra, I do have a follow-up question. Most recently in 2020, you went back to school at NNU to get your doctorate in doctoral education program. We did confirm that you withdrew that same spring semester that you started. Can you explain to the viewers and to us why you withdrew?
Oh, absolutely. I was in an accelerated program and quickly realized as the state superintendent of public instruction that I could not keep up with that work, and I made the ultimate sacrifice, and I decided to withdraw from that program so that I could serve the students of Idaho, the parents, and the teachers well.
Do you still believe in furthering your education?
Absolutely, and I probably, after this campaign, will re-enroll probably in that program.
At NNU?
Yes, NNU or another college of my choice. Whatever program fits my needs, and depending upon where I'm at in my career, yes, I plan on re-enrolling and finishing my doctorate at some point. But again, I made the ultimate sacrifice on behalf of the people of Idaho. The kids come first.
Now moving on to another topic of state versus local control, and this question will be for all three candidates once again, and Morgan has this one.
Yes. Idaho is big on local control within districts. Where do you draw the line on local versus state control and influence? Meaning, should the state or districts take a greater role in education in Idaho? And what's the deciding factor for the state to step in? And we'll start with Superintendent Ybarra.
Since day one, I've been a staunch supporter of local control. That is why you have never seen me mandate masks or close schools across the state of Idaho. That is exactly why you also saw my in-person learning bill get through the legislature, because when schools closed, we knew as educators that was not working. I did not like what I saw, so that was the time to step in. That's a fine example of time to get these buildings open, Madam Superintendent, make sure our kids are back in the classroom, and in-person learning is the first choice for parents and students in Idaho. This is a local control state, and I will continue to work with districts and support schools and students to achieve, which has been our vision since day one, and proven that it is working by the fact that we are 17th in the nation for achievement.
Mr. Durst, the same question for you, if you want me to repeat it. Where do you draw the line on local versus state influence? Should the state or districts take a greater role in education in Idaho?
So it's an important question. I think if we look to the Idaho Constitution, that provides the guide for us. The Idaho Constitution, as we've already talked about, tells us that we have a public education system to support a Republican form of government. And so when we saw last fall families being forced to mask their children over their own objections, that was a case where we should have gone ultra-local, back to the parents. The State Board of Education should have passed a state board policy to prohibit mask mandates in local school districts. If you're in the West Ada School District, you would have had to stand in line for hours to kiss the ring of the king to be able to get to choose what to do with your child. I think that's wrong. As it relates to things like critical race theory and social justice indoctrination, this again is a constitutional issue. The Constitution requires that we have a Republican form of government, and those things are antithetical to that goal. And so I believe it is imperative that the superintendent, the State Board of Education work together to protect our Constitution, and if that means we need to pass policies to prevent those things from happening in our schools, so be it. I'm an advocate for the Constitution, and I believe we have to defend it at all costs.
Mrs. Critchfield, same question for you.
10-year board member, Cassia County School District, live the life of local control. You're locally elected by the community. Here's an area where I can draw a contrast, again, between my opponents and myself. Being an advocate for local control and supporting that does not mean leaving school districts to themselves. And that is what I have consistently heard over the last 2 years, and goes back to a statement that Mr. Durst made. As president of the board, I was equally frustrated with the inability and the lack of support, the lack of service that was happening in the K-12 arena. And as an appointed volunteer, I was not able to address that. That's why I'm seeking a different position at the same table. And there's a statutory line of what is available for local boards. The superintendent is a partner, is a supporter, and the State Department of Education needs to serve as a service center.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Staying on the same basic topic of local versus state control, Logan Finney with IPTV has the next question.
This question first is going to go to Superintendent Ybarra, but will be for all three candidates. Many school districts in Idaho fund programs and staff by relying on local property taxes through supplemental levies and bonds that are approved by voters. While ultimately the legislature holds the purse strings, the superintendent proposes and helps craft that up of $2 billion budget that was discussed earlier. Do you believe that the state itself provides appropriate funding for local school districts and charter schools? And if not, how would you see that funding increased or decreased?
Well, as your superintendent of public instruction, you're absolutely correct. It is my responsibility to craft that budget, and then it's the legislature that makes the decision, but that's why you saw such historic increases this year in public education. I'm always going to support more money for public education. And moving forward, I will continue to work with the legislature around funding our public schools. But again, at a time when we can't afford gas at the gas pump and groceries at the grocery store, and even if you can, when you show up at the grocery store, half of the things that you want are not there, I think Idahoans get a lot of bang for their buck. I'm always going to be the superintendent that shakes every tree, turns over every rock, digs down in the pillows and the car seats of our car, looking for all of the extra change for public education. And again, you have seen the legislature since I took office as an effective leader give us nearly $100 million of new money for public education, and I will continue to be that advocate on behalf of public schools.
Senator Durst, same question goes to you. Do you believe that the state itself provides appropriate funding for local schools? And if not, how would you see that increased or decreased?
Well, let me start off by saying we can't spend our way out of this problem. This problem is structural in nature. Our funding formula is antiquated. Very few people in the state of Idaho actually understand how it works, and it causes districts to compete with one another in ways that is, frankly, not useful. I've proposed changing the funding formula. You can go to my website, durstforidaho.com/EPEA, where I've helped create a new funding formula that actually levels the playing field for funding for the state of Idaho. Did you know if you live in the Ada County, you live on the wrong side of Cloverdale Road, your children might get $2,500 less per student than those that live on the other side of Cloverdale Road? That's wrong. And this is also creating the need for more and more levies that go under local property taxpayers. We need to fix the system we have today. We need to stop dumping money into a system that doesn't work, and we need to find a real solution to that problem. I've proposed that solution, and as your leader, I'm going to advocate for it to ensure that we can fix this problem once and for all.
Mrs. Critchfield, same question to you. Do you believe that local schools get enough funding support from the state? And if not, how would you see that increased or decreased?
The facilities issue is a $1 billion problem in our state, and deferred maintenance is deficit spending. And when you contrast that with the $1.5 billion that we had in surplus, here's another opportunity for me to draw a contrast with myself and the current superintendent. Where was she at the table when these were being discussed, when budgets were being reviewed? I haven't talked to an Idahoan that was excited about getting a $65 check back when they know in rural Idaho that their schools are falling apart. We want to talk about long-term sustainability. We've got to look at another way to address this that does not take in the burden on our property taxpayers. And I don't think our educators or kids would like to be compared to finding change, how we fund education, as finding change in the car or in the couch.
Thank you all. Moving on to the next question here from Joe, and talking about issues really that directly impact the schools themselves. Joe, question for Senator Durst.
Yes, and this will be for all three of you, but Mr. Durst will ask you this first. We've heard from Idaho parents over the last several years how difficult it's been for some students at home. Some students are not good learners on the computer. They really missed out not being in the classroom. And we've heard from Idahoans and we heard from families, we need a plan to get our children back on track. Again, starting with Mr. Durst, what plan do you have to get students in Idaho back on track that were heavily impacted by learning losses throughout the pandemic?
Well, I think we need to recognize that not every school is the right fit for every student, and that includes not every modality is the right modality for every student either. That's why I'm such a huge advocate for school choice and having money follow students to their parents' school of choice. You may have the best local public school in the world, but it may not be the right fit for you. That's why I think you have to be able to open the school system, you have to open the opportunities, and you need to give parents choice as to where their kids go. You shouldn't be captured by a school district based on your zip code or the size of your bank account. And so when we talk about getting these children back to where they need to be, that includes making sure that they're in a location and an environment that works for them. This one-size-fits-all approach isn't working. So many families know it. I'm actually a parent of many kids that are in that school age, and I see it myself. And so I want to make sure that as a parent and as an advocate for parents, that we put their needs first so they can advocate for their children.
Mrs. Critchfield, what is your plan for getting students back on track?
Again, taking answers from what we've experienced over the last 2 years, I think one of the biggest areas that we really identified that could be a game changer for districts, families, students is seat time. Looking at the hours. There's not a magical hour that determines a kid is proficient. We have got this rule on the books for elementary, middle school, and high school kids, and at 660 hours, I guess magically you know the content, but at 559 you don't. And so when we look at how we transform and create the system that fits around us and fits for kids, it also has to take in accessibility to programs and how we create relevancy, particularly for our high school students, so that they know that they are capable and that the diploma means something when they graduate.
Superintendent Ybarra, your thoughts on a plan to get Idaho kids back on track who fell behind during the pandemic?
Well, unfortunately, because my opponents are not educators, it's sad to hear them stand on this stage and talk about mandates for financial literacy that are already in our standards, all the way from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade. And I was at the table when we talked about how our students performed just about a month ago during COVID. We did a study on their performance, and interestingly enough, we outperformed many of our neighboring states during COVID. Why? Because the majority of our schools were open. Now, you did see some rolling closures here and there, but that's why my in-person learning bill was effective. What the schools are doing right now is using their COVID relief dollars to offer research-based interventions for tutoring, after school, before school, and that's why you saw the legislation this year get through. One of my top priorities was optional all-day kindergarten, because we know we need to jumpstart some of those students who missed out on some of those small closures and some of those gaps in their educational system, and so we want to offer more resources out to parents. So we do have a plan moving forward to close those achievement gaps, and I'll be the teacher and the superintendent that can make that happen.
Next question from our panelists comes from Morgan Romero.
This is directed at Mrs. Critchfield first. Lawmakers did away with Common Core standards. It's been a long time coming. The Department of Education coordinated a rewrite. Do you like the new Idaho content standards, or do you believe that there should be further change?
When the review, or prior to the review starting, I was approached by our House and Senate Education Chair. I was the president of the Board of Education at the time, and there was a discussion about what to do, that this was a concern, a controversy, a challenge for parents and for teachers in the state. And the outcome and the idea and the goals were to get to a place where we put that to rest, where we can focus on teaching students and not worried about what the standards were. I signed a letter on behalf of the board which said that we as a board would participate in the review process that the legislature wanted to initiate. And we saw the culmination of that this year. I believe this is an opportunity for us to look at what those reviews and what those changes will bring about. And if they're not satisfactory, then we need to talk about a change, a wholesale change.
Mr. Durst.
So let's correct the record. Common Core is not gone in the state of Idaho. In fact, how do we know that? Common Core also includes millions of dollars of contracts that are given to businesses all throughout multinational businesses. And not a single one of their lobbyists showed up this legislative session to oppose the legislation that was passed. We did change a few of the standards, and that's a step in the right direction. I've been advocating for the ending of Common Core since it started, and I believe we need to do that, but we haven't gotten there yet. We'll still have SBAC testing, which is high-stakes testing that you take at the beginning of the year and the end of the year. It doesn't work for students, it doesn't work for teachers, yet we'll still have that. We actually need to really get rid of Common Core, not just say that we did. We don't just get to stand up on the steps of the Capitol and claim victory, much like we did on a cruise ship, on a ship, and say mission accomplished. The mission hasn't been accomplished. We've still got a problem, and we need to actually fix it.
Superintendent Ybarra, do you want to defend that at all?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Again, my opponents are showing you what they don't know. One of my opponents, again, this is not a classroom where you get to interrupt. Let me be the teacher and tell you to stop interrupting me. It's my turn. So with that, I will continue to tell the people this is exactly what I'm talking about. You asked me to do a job. The things you asked me to do was look at achievement. I did it. We're 17th in the nation. You asked me to get rid of the Common Core standards. I did it. And moving forward, I will continue to do everything on your behalf because I have a proven track record of success to work with our students in the state of Idaho. I have done everything the people have asked me to do. I've kept all of my promises.
Thank you.
And now to Logan Finney from IPTV.
Thank you. First, this is going to Mrs. Critchfield. We've talked about making sure that students are able to stay in the classroom, but what is your plan or your recommendation to local schools for keeping students and their families safe in the face of another wave of COVID or another new variant?
I'm hoping that we're not going to talk about it anymore. I fully believe that our local boards and our local schools are in a practice where they know how to do this. I think that happened about August of 2020. We knew how to live COVID. People had made up their minds on how to do that. And so what I would like to see is the attention that we need to have for the learning loss that has taken place and for the acceleration that needs to take place. That what we're focusing on is how we continue to improve achievement, real achievement. Again, a contrast. This is not to downgrade the hard work of our people, but it is a disservice to stand here and try to pad a resume based on third-party information, no contrast to where you started, where we are now. If we want to really tackle where we need to go, it's honesty that helps us get to that place.
All right, same question goes to Senator Durst. Do you have a plan or recommendations for local schools keeping students and their families safe if there's another wave of COVID, or do you see a role for the state in that arena at all?
So again, parents are tired of being lied to. What you just heard from Superintendent Ybarra is a pure lie. We still have Common Core. That is a fact. And she can try to talk down to us as if we're her students, but that doesn't change the fact that this is what's going on. We still have Common Core. As to the question at hand, here's the question that I ask. Why is it that St. Mark's School in Boise was able to stay open all last year, and Fairmont Junior High, right next door, literally separated by a chain link fence, was closed for the majority of the year, and when they finally came back into school, forced kids to be socially distanced and masked? Why did that happen? I'll tell you why it happened, because people that are in the position to lead didn't fight for parents and didn't fight for kids. We have to fight for parents again. We have to trust them. If parents wanted children to go to school in person without a mask on, we should have let them. We shouldn't have told them they had to keep schools closed and not be able to learn, because we saw the negative impact that's had not only on student achievement, but on mental health for students. Suicide rates are going through the roof, and that's a direct relationship to the decisions that were made by both the State Board of Education and the State Department of Education.
Superintendent Ybarra, before you get to that question, I do want to give you an opportunity to respond to Senator Durst's claims that what you said was an outright lie, and you have 30 seconds for that.
It's ludicrous. He wasn't there while all the educators and stakeholders across the state worked diligently for 2 years on the standards, trying to please the people of Idaho. And I think it's a terrible disservice to all of those people who volunteered to rewrite the standards, all of those educators who worked hard on behalf of Idahoans to give them the product that they wanted, and the legislature who stood behind me on the Capitol steps to say to the people, this has been a long time coming, 7 years, and so we are happy to give you that product. The other thing he didn't mention was there is a study
Sorry,
right
there's
now
the 30
working on
seconds
the
for that
test
is
to get
up.
rid of that next.
I'm sorry. Now back to the original question. Logan, would you like to repeat that, please?
Yes, of course. Superintendent Ybarra, what is your plan or recommendation to local schools keeping their families and students safe in the face of another wave of COVID?
As the only candidate on this stage that's been appointed to the statewide coronavirus working group by the governor, what my opponents don't know is there is a statewide roadmap moving forward should we have to address this issue again. I do want to give the educators of Idaho a huge thank you for all the work that they did. There was not a blueprint to follow. It's really easy to stand up here as a non-educator and Monday morning quarterback and finger point and face blame and put blame on people for things that we could have never foreseen. They did a great job, and I think everybody is ready should another round come at us. We have the in-person learning bill where districts now know how to pivot quickly to online learning. They know how to keep buildings open. They know those mitigation strategies, and the state does have a roadmap out there to help us moving forward as Idahoans.
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, we have been receiving questions from our KTVB viewers. And this next one is Joe's been tracking this. So, Joe, what do you have?
Yes, we got a question in for the candidates here, and this is from Rick. Rick writes to us. He says, teachers I know do not feel that the legislature, parents, and administrative staff respect teachers. How do you change this mindset and make teaching respectable? Again, that's from Rick. Thanks for the question. We'll start with Mr. Durst. Mr. Durst, how do you plan to keep teachers in Idaho knowing that the political temperature is so high right now that we've spoken to teachers that say it's just not worth teaching in Idaho right now because of masks and school board meetings? I will have to go, I guess, help children in a different state.
So the first question is, we need great teachers? And the answer to that question is absolutely yes. I love teachers. I was raised in a family of educators. My grandfather was a building principal and a school teacher in the Boise School District. My mom was a high school counselor for 20 plus years in the Valley View School District. And like I said, I've been a teacher as well. So I appreciate and understand the need for great teachers, and I want to support them however I can. What I think that looks like is also allowing teachers to get back to actually teaching again. When I look at the education system right now, what I see is a system full of strings and bondage. And I think what we need to do is we need to be able to open the system back up and let teachers teach the way they know how. Instead of requiring them to use one pedagogical approach versus another, they need to be able to use the gift that they have and find their way to those content standards rather than giving them so many specific rules and regulations on how they're supposed to do their job. I think when you actually give teachers that freedom, you elevate the profession, you allow them to be able to do their job well, and then we get better results, and that improves not only their experience, but also improves the relationship that they have with others.
Mrs. Critchfield, what do you say to Idaho teachers watching tonight that say, I'm worn down, this has been a very difficult last 2 years, and frankly, I'm burnt out and don't want to do this anymore? How do you keep those people teaching Idaho classrooms?
I want to start off by saying I hear them. As a candidate in the last 7 months, I've gone to over 50 classrooms, and I was a substitute teacher for 6 years in a variety of classrooms, covering all sorts of topics. And in the fall, I voluntarily subbed again so that I could understand in today's terms what that feels and what that looks like. I fundamentally believe that one of the reasons that our teachers feel discouraged about their profession has less to do with the legislature and more about the fact that we have not had a real state advocate that will put forward the ideas, the respect, the value that we need to have. We need to simplify the role of a teacher. They need a champion. We need to restore that value. It comes in non-financial ways equal to financial ways. I brought forward the recommendation that the governor had in his budget to build out the career ladder, how we support our teachers. It also has to take in the culture, and the leader sets that culture.
Superintendent Ybarra, as Superintendent of Public Instruction, what have you done over the last year for teachers that have reached out? I know teachers have reached out to the highest offices in Idaho and said, help us, we're burning out.
Absolutely. And what the public told me, to all the educators out there, remember, I am a teacher, I've walked in your shoes. What the public told me during the pandemic was, I'm not a teacher and nor do I want to be, and I miss my classroom teachers. So that's first and foremost. Next, you saw me ask for $1,000 bonuses for all of our teachers across the state, and those were awarded, as well as a 7% increase for our classified staff and our administrators across the state. Also, I'm continuing to share your success stories. You have seen me since I took into this office, turn my department into a customer service oriented group to serve you out in the field. But what I will also say that the National Teacher of the Year told me not too long ago was teachers need two things. They need trust and they need time to get that job done. And I'm the only candidate on this stage that can go across the street to the legislature and explain that to them, because I was a teacher. I understand how to lead the field. I understand how to implement things, grassroots, boots on the ground. And you have seen me in action work very hard for that $35 million pay increase in the career ladder that you saw this year. So hang in there. The best is yet to come, educators, and thank you for everything that you did during the pandemic.
Next, we go to our Morgan Romero with the next question.
I want to start with Mr. Durst, because you've claimed many times that critical race theory is happening in our schools. It's being taught in schools. What evidence, I haven't heard you answer this, what evidence do you have either way, whether it is or is not being taught in schools?
So what we've seen throughout the state of Idaho, let me give a couple very, very concrete examples. The first is the Portrait of the Graduate program that they have in the Coeur d'Alene School District. It's a version of critical race theory of social justice indoctrination that they're being pushed system-wide in the Coeur d'Alene schools. Another is WIDA, which is a national organization based in Madison, Wisconsin, which we have incorporated by reference in Idaho rule. WIDA supports critical race theory. They name it by name, and it's included in all of our content standards that we have. It still exists, Superintendent Ybarra, that hasn't been removed. It's not a part of the content standards that have been changed. We still have WIDA content standards for English language learners, and those are two very specific examples. But we know that it's happening in Boise School District. We know that it's happening in the West Ada School District. We know it's happening in the Nampa School District. There are places that it's happening, some places more insidiously than others, but it is happening, and we must stop it once and for all.
In your definition, what is critical race theory?
Critical race theory is when it's a Marxist theology or theory that says we place people into two groups. And instead of using economic terms for those groups, we use racial groups. One group has been oppressed and the other group is doing the oppressing. And those that have been doing the oppressing should feel shame for what they have done. They should feel shame for their heritage. That's wrong. We don't need that. We don't need help dividing our society. That is antithetical to Article 9, Section 1 of the Idaho Constitution, and it's something that we absolutely must stop.
I'm going to push back on that. That's not what critical race theory is. It's a framework, it's a lens at which to look at institutional and systemic racism. So, Mrs. Critchfield, do you believe that it's in Idaho schools?
I've seen no evidence of a systemic effort to have it in our schools. This is what I do know. I talk to a lot of people who have no idea what it is. They've heard the acronym, and some people aren't even sure what the acronym spells out. And for those folks, they're wondering what's going on. If we can use that to draw more attention to what is being taught in the classroom and engage our parents, that's a good thing. To scare people is not a good thing. I know that for parents who have looked into it that are concerned, they are worried that it's in their schools. I know that school boards are saying, we don't have it here, and we know that policymakers aren't sure what to do. Those are the three things that I have consistently said. And then I would add that this is another opportunity for me to draw a contrast with both of my opponents. Both are talking about something either that they didn't know about, weren't involved with, or supported later, whereas I showed leadership and was invited to participate with the legislature 2 years ago to put forward legislation.
Was that legislation necessary, though? Was that a good use of taxpayer dollars and time if there was no evidence of CRT in Idaho schools?
Absolutely. The legislature wants to be responsive, as do any elected officials want to be responsible and responsive to the taxpayers. And that was a topic that came to the legislature at the end of 2 years ago, and there was discussion. How do we do this? How do we talk about it? How do we help school boards be able to communicate with their parents? How do we manage this problem? And Idaho was one of the first states to look into that, and we've got something on the books that will help guide us and serve as a backdrop.
You said parents concerned. I just want to follow up. Why are parents concerned? Well,
I think parents are concerned anytime there's information that may divide their child from something that is a value that they have at home. And I don't know that it needs to just be limited, these types of curricular conversations and discussions, just to CRT. There are a number of things that when you look at the system of local governance, a community elects a local board. We want and need parents to be engaged in the process of what is in the classroom. That's a healthy sign of a functioning community.
Superintendent Ybarra, in last night's debate, you said you went to history classes, government classes throughout the state. You didn't see evidence of it. You saw them teaching the Constitution, Bill of Rights. Would you stand by that?
Yes, I do. And I'm the only candidate on this stage as your state superintendent of public instruction that rolled their sleeves up and got out there and started visiting classrooms, talking to local boards. And my opponent, unfortunately, has misled the community on April 22nd, 2021. She said in front of the camera, and I quote, "I'm not in a position to take a position." She was not present when the legislature made that decision to enact a law. I am the one who came out and supported it publicly, and I'm looking at the voters tonight saying I do not support CRT. As the mother of an interracial child, Idahoans find that offensive, and so do I. It's ridiculous, but parents are concerned, and what I would say to you as a parent tonight, we're not one of those scary examples in the Hillsdale College Journal report, but I will be the superintendent on your behalf that travels the state and continues to investigate allegations of CRT, and I have yet to see it as your state superintendent. And thank goodness we're over 80% Republican in the state of Idaho, and we know that we're going to hold the line and keep that out. And regardless of what your political flavor is, I think most people find that conversation offensive.
I want to give Mrs. Critchfield 30 seconds to rebut what you said about her not being in a position to take a position.
Sure. Mrs. Ybarra is entitled to her opinions, but not entitled to her own facts. And that statement, at the least, is out of context. I absolutely was at the table when the legislation was created and worked with legislators on both sides of the House to move that through. The comment was about the initial question that Morgan posed, which is CRT everywhere? I didn't know at the time. No one knew. What we were doing was being responsive to what we had heard, how do we protect what's going on. That's what leaders do. When you don't know something, you say, I don't know. You don't make stuff up or take claim for things that aren't yours.
Time's up on that one. Now we turn it over again to Logan Finney.
Thank you. While no Democrat has held statewide office elected in Idaho since at least 2006 or 2007, in the several past elections, the superintendent's race is where they have come the closest. If you win this primary, you would face Democratic nominee Terry Gilbert in November. On the other hand, if you lose this primary, will you support your opponent on stage here who does receive that nomination? Let's start with Senator Durst.
So I think it's important that conservatives and Republicans understand that they have an opportunity this time to elect a real conservative to the state superintendency. They have an opportunity to elect someone who maybe in previous election cycles wouldn't have been able to be elected in a position ideologically that would have been hard to do. We know this fall is going to be a tremendous opportunity for Republicans, not just here in Idaho, but throughout the United States. And so I'm fully prepared to lead the Republican brand in this race. I have donated to more Republican candidates than both of my opponents combined. I have been volunteering for Republican candidates for years. I've also been the only candidate that's gotten a part of the Republican platform written, which helped us then lead legislation that stopped from Planned Parenthood from indoctrinating our students. So I'm proud of the Republican brand. I will support the Republican brand 100%, and I plan on being the nominee.
To follow up, if you are not the nominee, would you support Ms. Critchfield or Mrs. Ybarra?
I'm not focusing on that. I'm focusing on being the Republican nominee. That's what I'm working on to do. We'll talk about that on May 18th when I'm standing on the steps getting ready to get on the bus tour, and we'll see how they feel about that question.
All right, Ms. Critchfield, would you support the nomination of one of your opponents on stage tonight?
I want to start with the first part, and I support and have been a lifelong Republican and will continue to support the Republican platform. What your question was the risk or the question of a Democrat being elected. The three of us were in a room with Mr. Gilbert. He is a nice man. I believe that having competition further strengthens and emphasizes myself as a candidate and the conservative values, and making that distinction, I think, makes me an even more powerful candidate. Mr. Durst has several times touted that he has donated to Republican parties, which are the same ones who have given him an endorsement. So I don't know if he's paying for those endorsements or how that works. But I will strongly support the Republican platform and party, and will reserve the right to support one of my competitors, and I'm focused on myself being successful May 17th.
And before we get to Superintendent Ybarra, I do want to give Senator Durst an opportunity for 30 seconds of rebuttal on Mrs. Critchfield's comment.
Yeah, that's quite a comment to suggest that I'm buying my support. I mean, you know all about that. You've got plenty of people that are buying your support. We just look at your campaign finance report, full of $5,000 donations for people to do business with you and your husband. But that's another thing. Look, the reason that those central committees and those folks are supporting my campaign is because they know we have to have a conservative lead our schools. They don't need another establishment insider like you, Debbie. They need somebody that can actually fight for kids and fight for parents. And so that's what I'm here. When I've talked about donating to campaigns, I'm talking about legislative races, statewide races, congressional races, all the way going back to 2012. And so that's what I've done. I'll put my record of that against any of these two ladies because I know that I've donated more than both of them combined.
Well, I think we need another opportunity for rebuttal on the claims about your family.
Thank you. Go check out my finance report. It's public, it's transparent. I'm proud of it. I've worked hard. We have had so many contributors and donations from $1 to more than that, to $5,000. And as a small operation farm in the Magic Valley, we don't do business with the Idaho Forest Group. You can't make these connections because you're unhappy that we've been successful. I've raised more money than any other superintendent candidate in the history of this race, and that's because of hard work and people believe in me.
Thank you. And Logan, would you repeat your question, please, for Superintendent Ybarra?
Yes, let's get back to that first question. Superintendent Ybarra, if you do not receive your party's nomination, would you support one of your challengers on stage with you?
Well, I'm going to be the adult in the room because kids are watching us and say that I believe Idahoans are looking for a results-oriented conservative leader that has protected local control and their core values, and I am that superintendent that has done so. At the end of the day, I'm going to do what's best for children. I'm going to get on board moving forward with whoever is the nominee based on what the voters of Idaho tell us respectfully and do the right thing for children.
Thank you. We're getting close to the end of the debate, and so for this next question, I'd like to limit the time for answers to 30 seconds on this one, and we go to Morgan.
We just saw kind of a display of temperament among our candidates. Mr. Durst, I want to ask you, you have a very bold and controversial persona on Twitter. What example does your online tone and a rhetoric set for Idaho students? You participate in Young Life, in which I was a member of. You participate in FCA and serve as a mentor. What example does that set for Idaho kids, and would you change that tone perhaps if you were elected?
I think we have to have bold leadership. You know, the Bible tells us that we should speak boldly, and that's what I do. I take that biblical requirement quite seriously. I think that there are times where, honestly, on Twitter, I get frustrated with people because there's lots of liberal trolls that misrepresent what CRT is, for example, like you just did. And I think that we have to be able to speak against those things because we need to have truth. We have to have conservative voices being heard in those places. That's why I'm so grateful that Elon Musk is taking over Twitter. But we do need to have people who are willing to speak boldly, who understand what their role is, and who will fight for the things that are important to our students.
Name calling. Yeah.
Well, Mrs. Critchfield, how would you balance being a bold leader or, I guess, being more of a traditional leader that wouldn't have hot takes on things like Twitter on Twitter?
I will not do anything that would embarrass the state of Idaho, my family, or students. This is another area of great contrast between myself and my opponents. We've seen behaviors when things didn't go the way of recently of Mr. Durst, and a lawsuit when things didn't go the way of Mrs. Ybarra. And so there is a way to do this that is professional, responsible, and in a way that we can be proud of.
Superintendent Ybarra, how would you evaluate your leadership, and would you change anything? Specifically, would you wade onto Twitter and make public comments on things?
I'm 5'3" and 120 pounds, and I am not afraid to throw an elbow once in a while when I need to. You saw that from my bold leadership when, unfortunately, my opponent was behind that lawsuit, taking technology from our students at the worst time during a pandemic. Behind that, trying to make this office appointed and take away the vote from the people of Idaho. Number two, I am the only candidate up here who showed bold leadership when I wrote our U.S. Attorney General Garland a letter when he told our parents that they were domestic terrorists. Shame on him. I have a copy of it right here, and I will continue. I am not to fight on behalf of Idaho's children. I am not beholden to anybody. I do not work for the legislature. We are 3 equal branches of government, and I am that bold leader.
Thank you. We are just about out of time. I'd love to get another hour of this and get into more questions. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to do that now. So We are going to go back now to closing statements, and we will go back to the same order that was the random draw earlier, with Superintendent Ybarra having the floor first for her 60 seconds.
Idahoans, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for listening to this entire debate. We have a wonderful state, a great place to raise a family, and a great educational system. That's why everybody keeps moving here to the best kept little secret in the nation, which is our home, Idaho. I care very deeply about Idaho's over 300,000 children who in the last 7 years have made great gains and deserve our recognition. Our over 300,000 students deserve a state superintendent like myself who has a proven track record of success, the expertise of a lifelong educator, and one who already has the strongest team in place to take us to top 10 in the nation. I have the heart of a mother, and I will continue to lead us and do what you've asked me to do. I love my job. I'm State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Sherri Ybarra, and I humbly ask for your support on May 17th, once again, as Idaho's Superintendent of Public Instruction. And like the kids always say, vote for Sherri in the primary, please.
Senator Durst, you have the floor.
Thank you to the viewers who spent the last hour watching this debate. As promised, this race really boils down to two competing visions for the future of Idaho schools. The insider's vision of my opponents believes that the system knows best and that we need to spend more money to fix it. My conservative vision, in contrast, believes we need to get back to trusting parents again, that we should put parents back in the driver's seat of their children's education. We should let them lead as God intended. To do that, we really need to end Common Core. We need to stop critical race theory and other social justice indoctrination. We need to stop the sexualization of our schools. And we need to empower parents by providing them real school choice where money follows students. This race is simple. There are two insiders and one conservative outsider. As the conservative standard bearer in this race, I ask for your support. Listen, at the end of the day, you have a choice to make. And fellow Republicans, I've been concerned and frustrated just like you the last 2 years. Federal overreach, a lack of educational leadership has caused me considerable problems. And you've been many problems as well. But the good news is change is coming, and with your support, we'll get it. That's why I'm asking you on May 17th to replace the Superintendent of Public Indoctrination with a Superintendent of Public Instruction. That's why I'm asking you and join me to say, let's go Branden, and vote Branden Durst, the conservative, for State Superintendent. Thank you.
And finally, Mrs. Critchfield.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the viewers and those that have put the program together to give us an opportunity for you to see this important decision. In fact, I believe it's so important that next to the decisions that Idahoans will make for governor, the state superintendent role is the one role that touches more lives and it has the ability and the power to strengthen our local communities, to help our kids, and to help our state. I'm going to ask you a question that I asked myself. What could happen and what would happen if we take an engaged parent with a passionate teacher? We could spark a generation of skilled and confident learners that were ready to take the opportunities around them. You've got to change the leader if you're going to change the course. I believe in Idaho. I believe in educators. I believe in our parents. And I believe that I am the leader that has the vision, the drive, and the experience to make those goals happen. Debbie Critchfield, I'm asking for your vote on May 17. Thank you.
And I've just been told that we have just a little bit more time, so I want to ask a quick question of each of you. What are you going to do over the next 21 days to reach the people that you want to get your vote? Mrs. Critchfield.
Everything that you can possibly imagine, TV, radio, social media, we have billboards, we have signs, every mechanism. Most important to me is a very aggressive travel schedule over the next 3 weeks. I will be in literally every corner of the state, like I have been over the last year, talking with Idahoans and sharing and learning so that I'm ready to go day one.
Senator Durst.
We're going to continue to do what we've done for the last 14 months, which is listen to parents, listen to teachers, listen to voters, and ask them what they care about. And then ensure them that we have a plan and share those plans with them so they can be confident when I'm their state superintendent that they'll have an advocate. Because at the end of the day, that's what we have to do. We've got to be able to fight for them. And I've got a plan, and we're going to continue to get out throughout the state of Idaho, from Bear Lake County to Boundary County, to share that vision.
And Superintendent Ybarra.
I'm going to continue to do my day job as I have on behalf of Idaho students and parents. I don't think anybody wants a politician in this position. I will have a travel schedule and meet with voters upon their request, but the best thing I can do for Idaho students and parents is be the best superintendent and keep all of my promises. So again, I ask for your vote. Vote for Sherri in the primary.
Primary election coming up on May 17th. And once again, as we said at the beginning, I really do want to thank all three of you for taking part in this debate. When we have seen other debates being canceled, I think it was a very good opportunity for the people of Idaho to really hear how you feel about so many important issues. Thank you.